What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV here, back again with another Tottenham update. But before we get into all the Tottenham news, go check out our website, WeAreTottenhamTV.com, for all the latest blogs. And if you want to get some merch and support the channel, we'd really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into it. Making his debut on the Tottenham update today, Barnaby Slater is with us to talk about all the Tottenham news over the past 24 hours. But let's hope you're not too upset before we get into anything, because the first bit of news we will be talking about is Romero, and Ange Postecoglou has confirmed in his press conference that there is bad news on the Romero injury front. He is quoted as saying, "Not so great with Romero. He had a scan and he's got a hamstring strain. We're looking at 4 to 5 weeks with him being out," which is absolutely devastating news. The games he is set to miss in that time is Brighton away, Bournemouth at home, Burnley at home in the FA Cup, Man United away, the FA Cup 4th round, and potentially Brentford at home after that as well, if he can't make it. We heard last week, I think it was the Evening Standard, reported some decent positive news that Romero was set to be fit for Thursday's game against Brighton. Apparently that isn't true, and just as, again, we seem to get more players back. You know, we've just recently recovered Richarlison, we've recovered Sarr. It looks like players are finally coming back, and then we just lose another crucial player for 5 weeks. I mean, how gutting is that? Especially, again, Romero in such a crucial position with Van der Ven still not back fit, which we'll get into a bit later. But it's got to be very concerning, again, that Romero's out for 5 weeks.
Totally devastating, because on the train here, I was just thinking, and for the last few days over Christmas, and I hope everyone had a great Christmas, just been thinking with that kind of three wins on the trot, Brighton away have not been in great form. They're kind of very bitty, both home and away. Thinking, now that Romero's been back, it's really noticeable how important he is in terms of playing those balls in between the lines into our midfielders on the half turn, or into even some of the forward players. And now, whoever comes in for Romero, I think realistically, even if you take away what it's going to cost us defensively, it's really going to cost us in the attacking sense of how our centre-backs use the ball going forward as well. One small positive is that Udogie will be back against Brighton, and he obviously does offer far more options playing that inverted central midfield role, taking the ball on the half turn. But I do think, like I said, whoever comes in at centre half, they're just not as kind of brave with the ball, not only in bringing it out themselves, but in playing those passes into the pockets through the lines as well. So very, very upsetting. I kind of thought that because Ange had brought him off at the first sign of a little tightness, that maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but it clearly is 4 to 5 weeks, and puts a bit more pressure now, I think, on the transfer window. And part of me, when I was listening to this, and I found out about it on the train on the way here, part of me was like, should someone from up above not have said to Ange, maybe don't mention it, because whoever's selling, like Todibo or any of those players that we're interested in at centre half, they're now going to say, oh, well, we know you need it at the start, so put on another 5 or 10 million, and Daniel Levy won't be paying that.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, we definitely know that. He always waits for the best price, which usually comes at the end of the window. But clearly, it's an absolute necessity. We can just get one in as soon as possible. But we know the transfer market in January can be very, very complicated market, don't we? So we'll have to wait and see what happens in January. But in the meantime, you know, until we have a new centre back through the door, who do we start in place of Romero? Obviously, when Romero was suspended for 3 games after he got the red card against Chelsea, we kind of chopped a bit. Dyer came in for the Wolves game, then he got dropped, and Emerson came in at centre-back. Based on what you saw out of those 3 games, and what Ange did, do you think he persists with Emerson there, or do you think he is tempted to bring Dyer back in?
I think you'd have to guess that he will go back to Emerson Royale alongside Ben Davis. But, and here's where the danger is of me getting controversial and you know, getting the entire viewership angry. I don't think Dyer played as badly when he came on the other day as everybody else did. And what I think is that Eric Dyer is a better player with the ball at his feet than Emerson Royale is. But it's close. And also, I think Emerson Royale is a lot more confident than Eric Dyer is. So I'm not saying that Dyer should come in. I'm just saying that I think it's going to be a tighter decision than maybe a lot of people would think.
Mm.
But my instinct is Royale is just above in the pecking order. What do you think?
I agree, and I just think we need. I think without Emerson there, without someone who has a bit of recovery pace, which Dyer and Davis just unfortunately don't, especially when they're together, I think it really prevents us from really being very proactive in our defending. It always gives a bit an air of anxiety and insecurity when we have two players who we know are going to be looking over their shoulder all the time for that run in behind. Whereas at least Emerson. Yes, I don't think he might be as good positionally, or maybe even as good, playing out the back as Dyer. But at least I feel like we can be a bit more aggressive with him in the team, be a bit more proactive in our defending. He can really kind of go early when it comes to tackles, a bit more like Romero does. Whereas I feel like Dyer is always going to be backing off a bit because I think he knows. If he gets if any of the attackers get a run on him, we're going to be in trouble. But it's going to be very interesting to see.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe one way of thinking about it is Brighton are not renowned for throwing the ball into the box. If they were, maybe Dyer would be a better pick because he is better in the air. He won quite a lot of headers in that last game, some important headers. But maybe because they're not, then he will play Emerson Royal. But one thing I would say is, I think that disallowed goal in the previous game is a good way of looking at it as well. Emerson Royal can get the ball stuck under his feet a little bit. And obviously, Vicario's not going to change what he does. They're going to play the goal kicks, 5 yards to their right and 5 yards to his right and 5 yards to his left. And if Royal gets the ball stuck under his feet or tries to put his foot on the ball there, then we could end up getting ourselves in a lot of trouble. But Big Ange wants us to play front foot. He wants us to embed this culture of play into the team. And once again, with injuries hitting us again and again, he is asking them to do that, and that is what will happen. And, my recollection of Royal and Davis playing, I don't look back on it and be like, oh, we conceded 14 goals because they put their foot on the ball. So they're able to do it, and it's just whether or not we'll be fortunate tomorrow that it doesn't cause us a cropper.
Yeah, it will be, hopefully, in a weird way, the fact that they've already played together a bit and this isn't going to be new to them will give them that bit of experience that they're not just coming in as a new partnership, essentially, even though Romero's got that injury. So hopefully that can stand us in good stead. Moving on to the next story. This comes from about Mickey van de Ven. Ange was talking in his press conference about his potential return from injury, and he said Mickey van de Ven is getting closer. He says, I don't think he'll be back for Burnley, maybe Man United, but I wouldn't know until I see him in training, and he's at the tail end of it now. He was also asked about whether he takes much stock about signing a left or right-sided centre-back in January. He said, I don't put as much stock into the left side or right side of the centre-back scenario. We just need another player in that position who can provide some more depth for us and the ability to change it up. It won't matter if it is a left-sided or right-sided. It's more the profile and characteristics. We didn't go looking for a left-sided centre-back at the start of the year. It just happened that Mickey was the perfect centre-back. Even if we had another left-sided one, I still would have signed him. It is about looking at the right profile, the right characteristics, and seeing what is available, and then going from there. In terms of Mickey van de Ven, though, it's really good news that hopefully he's back mid-Jan. Can't come soon enough, can it, for Mickey van de Ven?
Yeah, absolutely huge. Really need him back as soon as possible. However, not to slam some negativity on it, hamstring injury for players who are quick, incredibly dangerous. I really love how Big Ange has so far over the time he's been at Spurs shown that he is careful with these players, not rushing them. I don't feel he rushes players back as quickly as maybe Conte once did. And I think we should really treat Van de Ven with kind of, wrap him in cotton wool a bit, not rush him back, because the moment he gets in a sprint, if his hamstring goes again and would probably go worse, it's completely self-defeating. So he said, as you mentioned, I think potentially Man United. I wonder if that would be more like on the bench for that. As he said, he hasn't seen him in training yet, and I think he'll really work him in training to make sure that it's absolutely fine. But yes, in answer to your question, absolute key player, even more so now that Romero is out. And as you mentioned in the last point, if realistically Levy can't get a player in early as Ange wants, another centre-back, then we will be waiting for Mickey van de Ven to come in and having to play those players we mentioned before until that. So the quicker the better, but also let's not rush him.
Yeah, 100%. In terms of in January, what Ange was saying about signing a left or right-sided defender, for you, does it really make a difference in what kind of side we sign? Obviously, he's saying that he looks more the attributes and the characteristics of the defender more than he's a left foot or left-sided or right-sided defender. Most people, if you ask most fans, they would say we need a left-sided centre back. But for you, does it make too much of a difference?
I think my answer is kind of twofold. Firstly, I think Ben Davies has proven himself to be an excellent kind of maybe fourth choice, and on the left-hand side of the two centre halves. So I'm less kind of bothered about that now. So I'd say we should be looking for someone who's right-footed. But I think the key point is, and I agree with Ange on this, that if they're good enough and the attributes are correct for the style that we're playing, which I think is basically first and foremost probably someone quick enough to play the high line, and secondly, someone good enough on the ball and brave enough on the ball, as Romero is, to play those balls in between the lines and play those passes that set off our style of front foot football. They are more important attributes than whether they're right or left footed. And for instance, it would never bother me if Mickey van der Ven had to play on the right-hand side of the two, and vice versa with Christian Romero. So whoever comes in, I think that'll probably be the same. As I said to you before we went on air, though, the one thing that kind of is different from that is I think Ben Davies is currently kind of top of the pecking order because of the injuries, because of his left-footedness, and that gives us balance on the left and allows us to play those balls into, whoever's playing on the left, be that Son or Richarlison, or into Udogie, into central midfield on the left of the kind of inverted two. So I think, if we end this January with a 4 of Van der Ven, Romero, Ben Davies, and one other, be that Todibo or Tosin, or I think people will be disappointed with this, but I think we're probably seriously looking at Lloyd Kelly again as well because of his and Tosin's contract situation. Then I think that will be a 4 that would stand us in good stead going forward. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's probably the right way for Ange to look at things, and I think he's actually proven so far in his first few months of his tenure that he doesn't necessarily look at players as you're this position or that position. He definitely looks at the attributes they have and sees where they can fit into the team and what attributes are required for each role. And he's certainly shown to be adaptable in those kind of things. So it doesn't surprise me that he doesn't necessarily will be kind of pigeonhole a defender as, you're left-sided or right-sided. He just looks at the attributes. Next story comes from The Athletic, and they're reporting on the Conor Gallagher situation. They're saying that Tottenham were serious suitors for Conor Gallagher towards the end of the summer. It is understood then offer of £50 million would be enough to convince Chelsea to sell Conor Gallagher in January. Obviously, this story doesn't seem to be going away, does it, between Conor Gallagher and Spurs? It is a very interesting one because he is currently, I think, captain or vice-captain at Chelsea. He started every game this season. Definitely seems a player that has been relied upon by Pochettino, but with Chelsea actually in a weird way, because they're doing so badly in the league, it could cause problems with their FFP status. It means they might be forced to sell players like Conor Gallagher, who are homegrown players, for their profit. But from a Tottenham point of view, do you see in January, do you actually expect Tottenham to be splashing out 50 million for Conor Gallagher in January?
I think if it became clear that Conor Gallagher was interested in a move to Spurs and Chelsea were interested in selling him to us because, and I think I mentioned this to Marlon on the last watch-along, I think Conor Gallagher is basically their only player with sell-on value who they could sell at this point, because they bought so many young players on such long contracts that, there's been rumours that Madueke Poch might not like Madueke that much, but he's on an 8-year deal. So they can't be selling him because no club is going to play what it would take to get him out of that deal, right? So they're looking at Gallagher, 18 months left on his contract, unwilling to sign a new one at the moment, probably because, he's through the academy, he'll be on much lower wages than all of those signings who've come in. Their new contract probably not offering him nearly as much as he could get if he signed on somewhere else. Kind of, similar to the Mason Mount thing and why he ended up going to Man United. Gallagher would look, I think, at Ange Ball at Spurs now and think, I think Spurs over the next couple of seasons are looking like they're going to be far less chaotic than Chelsea. So if he made it clear, I think, to the middle people, the agents or Levy via proxy, that he's interested, and then the key thing, if Spurs then got a bid that they were happy with for Hojbjerg off Juventus because they're interested, or Atletico, they've been interested. Let's say they got 30 for Hojbjerg and Conor was 45. I think they'd probably add on the 15, or they'd find a way of structuring it. Like you said, it doesn't go away. No smoke without fire in a lot of these situations. So it wouldn't surprise me totally, but If it doesn't happen, that also wouldn't surprise me. But I think the key point is, do I think Gallagher would work well in Ange ball? I do. I think he's a player who is, doing the best he can at Chelsea at the moment under a chaotic situation. And if he was given that kind of Ange coaching of where to be and how to take it on the half turn, and he's a great finisher as well and makes good runs into the box late, and most importantly, an elite presser of the ball, he's always working hard on the front foot, then I think he could really fit it. And I also think if he joined Spurs at this point from Chelsea, I think he'd immediately become a Spurs legend, because everybody would be like, you left them in your prime to join Spurs. When was the last time that happened? Never is the answer. Gordon Jury, maybe, back in my childhood.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one with that, because he, in the summer, was saying how he loves Chelsea. He said he grew up 10 minutes from the ground. He's always been a massive Chelsea fan. So for him to be Chelsea vice captain, or I think he's captained them many times this season, and then to turn around in January and say, I'm going to sign for Spurs, that would be a very big move for him. And I just question whether he would want to do that. But if Chelsea are desperate to sell and Tottenham are the only team putting up the money, then I guess he would have very few options. If Chelsea are in the mess they are.
I think he probably feels mistreated at the moment. Let's think about the amount of times that he was sent out on loan. He probably thought back then he was never going to get a chance. Then he's come in and he's done really well, and he works really hard. Like I said, I don't doubt that his wages are significantly lower than the other players, and then they will have obviously offered him a new contract, and it's probably still lower than the players they brought in. So he's like, well, this isn't right, this isn't fair. And this is really, it happens a lot when players come through the academy. They're almost their loyalty counts against them, because the board are like, well, you're on, let's say he's on, I don't know, 30 grand a week. They're probably offering him 50 or 60 grand a week, whereas Madueke is probably coming from PSV and is on more, or someone like that. Especially the Enzos of this world, or Caicedo, who's coming for 110 million. He's probably on 250 grand a week.
And Connor's sitting here saying, look, I'm captain.
Well, I've captained a lot of the games, and I'm playing better than these players, and you're offering me peanuts. Now, Spurs will immediately offer him 120 grand a week, probably, plus a big signing on fee. So it's that kind of loyalty. I don't doubt all the stuff he says about Chelsea, but him and his agents will be saying to him, look, this is your chance to make, also he's not super young anymore, is he? He's like 23, 24.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's not 18. So he'll be looking for a big payday, I think. And Chelsea, I think, have got themselves in a position, like you said, with financial fair play, where they probably can't afford to give him a big payday. And that's probably where the no smoke without fire comes in.
Yeah, I completely agree. In terms of what I think of him as a player, I think he'd be perfect for how we play. And I actually think in our system, I do think he's got more goals in his game. I don't think he scored a single goal this season. And I think he's a player, I saw it at Palace, he was scoring quite a lot of goals for them. So I think if you put him in that Spurs system, he's going to be getting loads of chances. And I think in terms of how he presses, he's absolutely fantastic. So if we can get a deal done, I'll be delighted with it. But it depends probably on the next player we're going to talk about leaving, and that's Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg. This comes from a publication out in Italy, Tutto Juve, which is a Juventus publication. They're saying that Tottenham have opened up, Tottenham are open to a loan with an obligation to buy formula for Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg to leave for a sum of less than 30 million euros. Juventus have always been in the market for Hojbjerg, and there have already been contacts with intermediaries between September and October to let him leave. Spurs will have to look for a replacement though if they are to sell him. In terms of Hojbjerg, obviously this season, I think he's done well whenever he's been called upon, essentially. I don't think he's had too many bad games, albeit I do think his flaws do get a bit exposed in the system with the things that he's weakest at. Do kind of become very apparent when he's playing at Ange ball, especially when he's playing the number 8 position. But considering how short of numbers we are in January, Basuma and Sarr, Bentancur not going to be available for the whole of January. Do you see Hojbjerg being let go if we're not going to get someone like Conor Gallagher in?
No, I don't. I think it would solely rest on whether a replacement who was Big Ange's choice were able to come in. Allegri's Juventus manager still, right?
Correct.
Right. So yeah, he seems like a bit of an Allegri player. Am I getting this wrong? Are there not rumours that Conte might go there?
There were. I think Allegri was struggling beginning of the season, but he's kind of turned it around.
He's turned it around. Okay. Well, let's say Allegri stays or Conte were to end up there, that is very much somewhere where Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg would do well. He'd also benefit from the extra kind of time and space you get in Italy. I think the thing with Pierre, exactly as you said, really good squad player at the moment, even under Ange, but he just takes half a second longer than than Ange wants their players to. His default setting is to be more conservative and more pragmatic. And it's only half a second when he's on the ball, maybe even less sometimes. But that is the difference between him playing the through ball to a player who's onside and playing the through ball to a player who's offside. And even in the tiny amount of time that Bentancur was on the pitch before he got injured for Ange, you could tell that he's more 1 and 2 touch. You know it already with Sarr and with Kulusevski when he plays in 10, and obviously Maddison as well, and Bissouma. So I think it's clear, is not a big Ange player, and we will be looking to get as much as we can. But if that doesn't come in and we don't have a replacement in January, then he'll definitely stay till the summer. But I can't see him being at Spurs past the summer at all.
It says here a sum of less than 13 million euros. Does that seem a bit cheap for you for a player of Hojbjerg's quality?
Yeah, but I think what's he got, 18 months left?
Correct.
So I think, I mentioned in the point before about Gallagher, if we were to get anywhere near 30 million pounds for him, you'd snap the hands off. If it was 15 million pounds, I don't think so, but probably somewhere between 20 and 30, you'd say, yeah, as long as we had the replacement.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think even if it means taking a bit of a hit, if it means we can upgrade the squad and get a replacement who's more suited to what we want to do, I don't really care about taking a bit of a hit.
I think we only paid like 12-ish for him, didn't we?
Yeah, we paid, I think, 15, and then we sold Walker Peters the other way as well. Yeah. So, we won't be losing too much money on him. The last story comes from Spurs official. They're confirming that Dane Scarlett will be returning to the club, having been recalled from his loan from Ipswich. Obviously, it hasn't really worked out well in the first half of the season for Dane Scarlett. Really unfortunate. Ange did talk about it in his press conference. He was asked whether Dane Scarlett's return would mean a potential loan for Valise. He said there are a lot of moving parts you're talking about there. Good to get Dane back, and obviously the loan didn't work out for him at Ipswich, which is disappointing for him and disappointing for us, because the reason we sent him out on loan was to get some game time rhythm and develop. It hasn't worked out. That way, so it made sense to bring him back. He is back training with us and becomes available from January 1st again. Then it is up to him. He will stay with us until the rest of the season, and we'll see how he trains and what opportunities he may or may not come along. So we'll address those situations then. Obviously, he didn't really confirm whether Valise potentially could be going out on loan, but with two 19-year-old strikers around the club, I can't see too many opportunities for both of them, either one or the other, I would assume. Obviously, Scarlett, at the beginning of the season, before he went out on loan to Ipswich, was getting a couple of opportunities. He played a bit in the pre-season. He played one half of football against Fulham in the Carabao Cup. I remember he came on at half-time, but then obviously went out on loan. I was genuinely very excited to see him in a championship loan for a team. Obviously, Ipswich are flying at the moment, top of the league. I was really hoping he would get some game time, and there's a lot of talk and hype about Scarlett, how well he could do. So it's really disappointing. He's probably had a handful of substitute appearances and hasn't had any starts, so hasn't really had the opportunity. And now, because he played in that Carabao Cup game, he can't go back on loan in the second half of the season, so he has to stay with Spurs now. So it's either he gets opportunities with Spurs or he's going to be basically in the reserves for the second half, which would be very disappointing. But what do you think will happen with Scarlett now he's back at Tottenham? Do you see him maybe being on the bench and getting some opportunities, or do you see him going back to the under-21s with the likes of Donnelly and Sunsop Bell and playing with them?
Yeah, it's interesting. You've just given me a lot of intel there that I didn't know in terms of the rules of the EFL and stuff like that. It strikes me then that maybe Ange thinks Scarlett might be able to help him a bit more than Valise is, because otherwise, wouldn't it be better for Scarlett to have stayed at Ipswich and maybe played his way into the first team, hopefully, unless Ipswich have said it's just not working or there's some personal issue? I don't know. I was at the Shakhtar game. He got a goal in that game, but he was pretty raw, and he looked pretty raw again in that Fulham appearance. Just like any young striker, any striker at all, really, I think he just needs the confidence that goals bring. And he's clearly talented, incredibly talented, good finisher. We've seen that enough in kind of pre-season appearances over the last couple of years. But he needs that kind of moment that's going to step him up from being a boy into a man on the pitch. And clearly Ipswich hasn't done that for him yet. So yeah, maybe we'll see him in some appearances off the bench. Maybe Valise will go on loan. I mean, Valise, from what I've seen of him, which is obviously very little at the moment, seems more like a classic number 9. Would probably benefit from some more direct balls going into his chest and flick-ons and stuff. Maybe at the moment he sees, with the kind of chances that we're creating, which is a lot of kind of almost flat on the floor balls across the box, like Richarlison's goal in the last one, or the Son goal against Liverpool, maybe he thinks Scarlett's a bit better at getting across his first man, and if he comes on late in a game where we're chasing, maybe he's more likely to make the runs that might result in goals. I'm theorizing. I'm not really sure. But if he's going to get his chance, he'll be training a lot. Hopefully he can make some difference to us. He's talented, and let's face it, this is what we've got to stick on, really. None of us thought Harry Kane was going to make it when he'd been on a lot of loans, and he needed that moment that worked for him. Tim Sherwood gave him that moment. And he got a few UEFA Cup games before that, didn't he? He'd scored a couple of UEFA Cup goals. But Scarlett needs something to happen for him to make a career at Spurs. So let's see if that happens.
Yeah, 100% agree. You see, obviously, easy to forget that Son is not available throughout January as well. So really, we only have one striker in for the whole of January and potentially beginning of February as well if South Korea do go to the final. So there is potential for one of those two to really stake a claim to be more involved in the first team if they can maybe come off the bench in a few games or maybe even get a start, maybe in one of the FA Cup games or a Premier League game. And then all of a sudden, there could easily be more opportunities. And I feel like with a lot of these young players, I feel like managers don't want to really put their full trust in them a lot of the time until they have shown something on the pitch for them to give them their trust. So I remember Marcus Rashford, no one knew who he was, and then he plays a Europa League game, scores 2 goals, all of a sudden he starts flying. So it can happen with a young player. In terms of Dane Scarlett, I would love to see him get some more opportunities, but it's been a massive shame of what's happened in the first half of the season. And maybe they're just thinking, even if he doesn't get many opportunities with Spurs, maybe they're just thinking it's better for him to train with us than train with Ipswich. He's not going to get game time either way. Maybe they're doing that balancing act. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in January, who gets more opportunities between him and Valise, and maybe Valise could end up with a loan move by the end of January if he's not getting the opportunities Scarlett is. So let's hope he definitely gets some more opportunities. But look, that is all for today's Tottenham update. Let me know in the comment section below anything we discussed today. Go check out Barnaby on the Spurred On podcast as well. The link will be in the title and the description. I'll post it there as well. But that is all for today's Tottenham update. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, come on you Spurs.